In my mother's house, I am a queen. Don't you tell me what to do.
Calm down, I'm trying to help you grow up.
Help, you're impossible!
Wait, please.
This is the beautiful story of Kamkam, the girl who believed she didn't even have to lift a pin for herself. Even after she got married, she still carried herself like a queen who must never touch a single chore. Kamkam stretched luxuriously across the velvet couch, tossing her long hair over one shoulder with all the arrogance of a queen surveying her kingdom. The morning sunlight barely touched the floor of her bedroom before she screamed, "Amaka, where are my clothes? My favorite dress." I said now, not in 5 minutes. Amaka, the house help who had endured 3 years of endless tantrums, tiptoed into the room holding a neatly folded dress. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached, for she had long since learned the rhythm of Kamkam's fury. "I've brought your dress, Ma." Kamkam snatched it from her, sniffing in disgust. "This is all wrong. Why is the collar crooked? Did you even iron it?" She flung the dress onto the bed with a sharp flick of her wrist. "Amaka, you are useless. Why am I surrounded by idiots?" Amaka's shoulders sagged. She had heard the words countless times before, but they never lost their sting. Kamkam never cooked, never cleaned, never lifted a finger for herself. From dawn to dusk, everything in the mansion revolved around her. Meals magically appeared on golden trays, clothes were washed, folded, and pressed without complaint, and the house itself seemed alive with servants catering to her whims. Today, however, there was something different in the air. Madame Ifioma, Kamkam's mother, watched silently from the doorway, arms crossed. Her expression was calm but firm, a stark contrast to her daughter's storm. "Kamkam," she said softly, but with an edge that made Kamkam pause mid-complaint. "We need to talk." Kamkam tilted her head, her face a picture of disdain. "Talk? About what, mother? My life? My clothes? My food? Everything is perfect as it is." Madame Ifioma stepped forward, her voice deliberate. "No, Kamkam, everything is not perfect. You have relied on Amaka for too long. She has done everything for you while you did nothing. From today, there will be no more house help in this house." Kamkam froze, her eyes wide, her mouth forming a perfect O of disbelief. "What? No house help? But how will I eat? How will I wash my clothes? I am a queen, mother. I am not meant to touch a broom or a spoon." Madame Ifioma's lips pressed into a straight line. "Kamkam, in this house, being a queen does not mean being lazy. You will learn to do things for yourself. Amaka will leave and you will manage." The words struck Kamkam like a bucket of cold water. For a moment, she simply stared, unable to form her usual torrent of insults or demands. Her world, a world of effortless luxury, had cracked. But, I cannot," she finally wailed, collapsing onto the couch dramatically. "Mother, you cannot do this to me. I am your daughter. I am a queen in this house. You will," her mother interrupted firmly. "Now." And just like that, Kamkam's golden empire of privilege began to crumble. The house that had always been her kingdom, where servants anticipated her every whim, was now a battlefield she had to navigate herself. She would burn her first meal, spill water on the polished floors, ruin a dress she had adored, and cry more tears than she had ever shed in her life. All because she had never been forced to stand on her own. Yet Kamkam was not ready to surrender. Even in panic, her mind whispered, "I am still a queen. Cannot bow. I cannot do anything for myself. Someone will come. Someone always does." But for the first time, Kamkam's world, built on indulgence, beauty, and cruelty, faced a threat it could not ignore. The storm of reality was coming, and there would be no one to shield her from it. Her arrogance, pride, and bratty ways would clash with life itself. And Kamkam had no idea that this was only the beginning. The queen had fallen from her throne, but the lesson that would reshape her life was just about to begin. Kamkam sat on her velvet couch, staring blankly at the empty kitchen, her heart pounding as if someone had shoved a live coal into her chest. The smell of toast burning wafted through the air, making her stomach twist. Her fingers fumbled with the toaster, a device she had never dared touch before. She pressed buttons randomly, hoping it would magically produce her perfect breakfast, just as Amaka always had. But there was no Amaka, no one to rescue her, no one to smooth over the chaos she created. "Mother!" she cried, her voice breaking with a mix of panic and fury. I don't know what to do. The house is, I can't." Madame Ifioma remained calm, her arms folded. Kamkam, you can do this. You've lived in comfort your whole life, but now it is time to learn responsibility. Amaka is gone. This is your home, and you must care for it. Kamkam's eyes widened, disbelief painted across her face. But she always did everything. She cooked, she cleaned, she washed my clothes, even my underwear. How can you take her away? Because it's time you learned, her mother said firmly. A queen who cannot serve herself is not a true queen. You will manage from now on. Kamkam trembled. The thought of doing even a simple chore, washing a plate, folding a towel, or cooking rice, made her knees weak. Her mind reeled. I cannot do this. I am a queen. I do not do work. I am meant to be served. The first task fell upon her immediately. Breakfast. She opened the fridge and stared at its contents as if it were an alien landscape. Eggs, milk, bread. All simple, ordinary things she had never dared touch herself. She picked up an egg, rolled it in her fingers, and gasped. Mother, what if I break it? What if I ruin everything? Then you try again, Madame Ifioma said, her voice unwavering. Mistakes are part of learning. Kamkam's hand shook as she placed the egg on the counter. She tried to crack it into a pan, but it slipped from her fingers and splattered onto the pristine marble floor. Her shriek echoed through the house, and she fell to her knees, staring at the mess in horror. How could this happen? She wailed. Amaka would never. She would never. Her mother's patience was being tested, but she held firm. Kamkam, clean it up. You are responsible for this. It is your house. The realization hit Kamkam like a thunderclap. I cannot rely on anyone anymore. I must do everything myself. The following days were a whirlwind of chaos. Laundry turned into disaster. She shrank a favorite silk dress in hot water. Bleach ruined her bedding, and she tangled her undergarments beyond repair. Cooking was worse. She burned bread, overcooked rice, and nearly set the kitchen on fire while trying to fry eggs. Every failure was accompanied by tears, anger, and countless dramatic collapses onto the couch, where she would cry and scream, I am a queen. I do not do this. This is unfair. Neighbors began to whisper. Even her friends noticed the dramatic change. The girl who once commanded servants with a flick of her wrist was now struggling to make tea without spilling it. Humiliation followed her like a shadow, relentless and unforgiving. Yet, in the midst of her panic, Kamkam experienced moments of realization she had never known. For the first time, she felt empathy, for Amaka, for the people she had scorned. Each dropped plate, each ruined meal, each spilled bucket of water was a lesson in what it meant to work, to serve, to care. And Kamkam hated it. But life had other plans. The spoiled brat who had once ruled her mother's house with an iron fist was beginning to see the cracks in her golden world. She was learning, painfully, that privilege without responsibility only leads to chaos and loneliness. By the end of the week, Kamkam could boil an egg without breaking it and sweep a floor without collapsing in tears. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Still, she muttered under her breath every time she had to lift a mop. I am a queen. I should not have to do this. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Life was about to hand her an even bigger challenge. Marriage. The very thought made her stomach churn. She would soon enter another household, her husband's, where no one owed her obedience, where her so-called queenly status would be tested more than ever. And Kamkam, the spoiled princess who had never lifted a finger for herself, was about to learn that being a queen is not about being served, but about how you live and act in your kingdom. Her journey from arrogance to understanding, from entitlement to responsibility, had begun. And the path ahead promised pain, growth, and a lesson she would never forget. The wedding had been a spectacle. The city seemed to bow to Kamkam's beauty, her sparkling gowns, and the way she walked like the world existed solely to admire her. The handsome man she had married, a young, successful, and strikingly handsome man named Chijiok, had fallen for her charm, her laughter, her wit, and perhaps, unknowingly, her arrogance. On the first day she stepped into her husband's house, Kamkam carried herself like royalty entering a new palace. The sprawling home, with its polished floors and elegant furniture, seemed ready to welcome her reign. But soon, reality began to whisper, faint at first, then louder with each passing moment. "Welcome, Kamkam," Chijiok said, smiling warmly. "I hope you'll be comfortable here. Make yourself at home." Kamkam's eyes flicked over him and then at the staff. A maid, a cook, and a driver stood quietly in the corner, expecting nothing, ready to serve when asked. For a moment, Kamkam smiled, remembering the ease of her mother's house. Then, a spark of defiance flashed in her eyes. She walked straight to the living room, dropped her designer bag, and flopped onto the couch. "I am a queen in this house too," she announced boldly, arms crossed. "Do not ask me to do anything. I do not touch a broom, I do not wash, I do not cook. I do not even touch my own clothes. Do not stress me." The maid's eyes widened, but she remained silent. Chijiok, however, frowned slightly. "Kamkam, in this house we all contribute. You are my wife, yes, but that doesn't mean you do nothing." Kamkam laughed, a sharp, almost cruel sound. "Oh, husband, do not lecture me. I am used to being treated like a queen. I do not touch anything. If you want things done, you should hire people. I am not your servant." Chijiok's mother, who had been quietly observing the exchange, cleared her throat. "Kamkam, respect this household. There are ways we do things here. Everyone helps maintain the home. No one expects you to do everything, but no one is exempt from learning responsibility either." Kamkam's lips curled into a sneer. "In my mother's house, I am a queen. That will not change here. Do not forget that." That night, as Kamkam lay in the lavish bed, she felt a strange tension in the air. The servants went about their duties, whispering among themselves, careful not to offend. But Kamkam noticed the faint judgment in their eyes, the slight shaking of heads as she passed by. She had always ruled through fear and tantrums. Now, she realized that power alone did not command respect in this house. The following days were chaos for Kamkam. Breakfast went wrong almost immediately. She refused to wash dishes, leaving a mountain in the sink. The cook glared as she tried to boss her around, and the maid gave her cold stares when Kamkam demanded perfection without lifting a finger. Even Chijiok, who loved her dearly, began to speak firmly. "Kamkam, this is not how a household works. You cannot do nothing and expect everyone to serve you." Her pride flared, and she snapped. "I am a queen. I do not do chores. This is my life. You cannot force me." But reality pressed in relentlessly. Meals spoiled because she refused to help. Laundry piled up. Rooms remained dusty because she would not lift a hand. Guests who visited for family gatherings whispered behind her back, remarking on her laziness. Humiliation, the kind Kamkam had never truly known, began to gnaw at her pride. Even more crushing was Chijiok's quiet disappointment. Unlike her mother, he would not tolerate tantrums forever. "Kamkam," he said one evening, gently but firmly, "I married you because I love you, but I cannot allow you to treat this house as a playground. You must learn some responsibility, for your sake and ours." Kamkam's heart thudded. No one had ever spoken to her this way. Not her mother, not Amaka, not anyone. She wanted to scream, to throw things, to stomp her feet, but a strange, unfamiliar feeling took root. Fear. Fear that she could not control this house with her usual arrogance. Fear that her queenly attitude had limits. And for the first time, Kamkam glimpsed the truth. Arrogance alone could not rule a home. Respect, effort, and humility mattered far more. but stubbornness still clung to her like a shadow. She muttered under her breath every morning as she faced her growing mountain of domestic duties. I am a queen. I should not have to do this. I will show them I am special. Little did she know, the coming weeks would break her pride completely, forcing her to confront her flaws, learn humility, and ultimately transform into a woman who understood the meaning of responsibility and respect. Kamkam's reign as a spoiled princess had begun in her husband's house, but the kingdom was about to teach her lessons she could not ignore. The first week in Chijiok's house had been nothing short of a nightmare for Kamkam. She had resisted every suggestion, every gentle nudge from her husband and mother-in-law. The reality of life without a house help was sinking in, but she refused to bend, insisting on her queenly status. Yet, her stubbornness carried consequences, and the household was beginning to feel the strain. Breakfast plates were left unwashed, laundry piles threatened to topple over, and the once perfect house began to lose its sparkle. Even the staff, who had tried to tiptoe around her whims, were now growing frustrated. Ma'am, the cook said cautiously one afternoon, the dinner is almost ready, but would you like to help set the table? Kamkam threw back her head and laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. Set the table? Me? I am a queen. Why should I touch a plate? I do not serve. I do not clean. This is your job, not mine. The cook's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Later that evening, Chijiok returned home from work, expecting a peaceful household. Instead, he found the kitchen a disaster. Rice burnt, soup spilled across the counter, and the maid nervously trying to salvage what she could. What happened here? Chijiok asked, eyes wide. Kamkam lounged on the sofa, draped dramatically in her silk robe. Husband, do not lecture me. Guests who came to visit could not ignore the chaos. Friends whispered about the spoiled new bride who refused to lift a finger. Even Chijiok's colleagues, who had met Kamkam at a formal dinner, later joked about how the queen of the house refused to touch a broom or a plate. For the first time, Kamkam felt a sting she had never known, embarrassment. Her arrogance, once her shield, now isolated her. The very thing she had used to assert power was creating a wall between her and the world. Days passed, and the consequences intensified. Meals were missed, laundry piled up, and the house became a battlefield. Chijiok tried reasoning, but Kamkam's pride would not bend. She would retreat to her room in huffing, dramatic sighs, declaring, I am a queen. I do not touch anything. Even small tasks, like helping fold laundry or making tea, became monumental struggles. Kamkam dropped clothes, spilled drinks, and almost set fire to the kitchen trying to fry eggs. Every failure chipped away at her pride, yet she refused to admit defeat. One evening, after a particularly disastrous dinner where soup had spilled on the floor and guests left early, Kamkam slumped on the couch, exhausted but still defiant. Chijiok sat beside her, calm but serious. Kamkam, he said gently, this cannot continue. You must change. Not for me, not for your mother-in-law, but for yourself. Being a queen is not about doing nothing. True strength is in taking responsibility. Kamkam's chest tightened. She wanted to yell, to cry, to lash out. Yet, deep inside, something stirred. The whispers of reality, the sting of humiliation, the growing distance from respect. It all pressed on her heart. For the first time, Kamkam realized that her arrogance had a price, and her refusal to do anything could ruin not just her home, but her relationships, her reputation, and her marriage. The queen, who had once thought herself untouchable, had begun to see the first cracks in her gilded world. She hated the feeling, yet she could not escape it. Life was forcing her to learn, whether she wanted to or not. And Kamkam, in all her stubbornness and pride, faced a choice. Continue her path of arrogance and isolation, or confront her flaws and begin the long journey of change. The day began like any other, yet for Kamkam, it would mark a turning point she could never have imagined. She had spent the morning lounging on the sofa, sipping juice from a crystal glass, while the house descended into chaos around her. Laundry lay in heaps, dishes festered in the sink, and crumbs carpeted the marble floors. Her husband, Chijiok, returned from work early, sensing tension in the air. What greeted him was a disaster. The kitchen smelled of burnt rice and fried oil, the living room resembled a war zone, and Kamkam, perched on the couch like a queen, waved her hand dismissively. "Husband, do not disturb me. I am resting. The house will manage itself," she announced, her voice sharp, full of pride and entitlement. Chijiok's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, his patience began to fray. "Kamkam, this is unacceptable. We cannot live like this. The house is falling apart because you refuse to lift a finger. You are part of this home, and your attitude is destroying it." Kamkam gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Destroying it? I am a queen in this house. Do not lecture me. Do not stress me." But her words had no effect. The chaos around her screamed louder than her tantrums. The cook and maid exchanged glances in the background, tired and frustrated. Guests who were due that evening for a small family gathering had already canceled, whispering about the spoiled bride who did nothing but demand. Panic began to gnaw at Kamkam's pride. She had never been confronted like this, never had her whims denied, never faced real consequences. The walls of entitlement she had built her whole life were starting to crumble. Her mother-in-law, who had watched quietly for weeks, finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Kamkam, enough is enough. You cannot continue this way. If you will not help maintain this house, you will not be treated as the queen you think you are. Respect is earned, not demanded." Kamkam's face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and fury. She wanted to scream, to storm out, to return to the fantasy of being untouchable. But when she looked around, she realized. The house was in shambles, her husband's eyes held disappointment, and even the staff looked at her with quiet judgment. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance. She could feel it crawling into her chest, heavy and suffocating. What if this continued? What if Chijiok lost respect for her entirely? What if she became the laughingstock of the neighborhood? And then it happened. Her attempt to cook dinner, something she had never dared do herself, ended in disaster. She tried to fry chicken, but the oil splattered across the stove, setting a small fire that quickly spread. Smoke filled the kitchen, alarms blared, and Kamkam screamed, flailing in panic. The maid rushed in to extinguish the flames while Kamkam collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I cannot do this. I am not meant to. She cried, shaking, tears streaming down her face. Chijiok knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder, firm but comforting. "Kamkam, listen. I am not punishing you. I am teaching you. You cannot live your whole life being served. This house, your home, your life, it requires effort. You must learn to take responsibility." The words struck deep. Kamkam wanted to resist, to argue, to retreat into her pride, but a strange, unfamiliar feeling settled in her chest, a desire to change. That night, she stayed awake, thinking about everything she had lost. Respect, dignity, comfort. She realized that being a queen meant nothing if she could not hold her head high without the service of others. Slowly, grudgingly, she took her first real steps toward change. She cleaned the burnt stove, washed a few dishes, and folded laundry. Imperfectly, clumsily, but she did it. Each small victory was a sting to her pride, yet also a quiet triumph. Kamkam's journey from spoiled brat to responsible woman had begun. It was painful, humiliating, and exhausting, but the seed of transformation had been planted. By the end of the week, she could cook a simple meal without starting a fire. She had cleaned the floors, folded clothes, and even helped set the table for dinner. Small things, yes, but monumental for someone who had lived her whole life untouched by responsibility. And as she lay in bed that night, exhausted but quietly proud, Kamkam whispered to herself, for the first time without arrogance. Maybe being a queen isn't about being served. Maybe it's about what I can do for myself and for others. The mornings were no longer filled with pampered indulgence for Kamkam. The sun had barely crested the horizon when she found herself standing at the stove, trying, for the third time that week, to fry eggs without burning them. Her hands shook, and the pan slipped slightly, spilling yolk across the counter. "Patience," she muttered under her breath, mimicking the calm tones her mother and Chijioke had used so often. "I can do this. I have to do this." It was not easy. Each small task tested her patience, her pride, and her temper. Folding laundry that refused to stay neat, washing dishes that seemed to multiply before her eyes, and sweeping floors that never stayed clean. Each chore was a lesson in humility. At first, Kamkam performed her duties reluctantly, complaining under her breath, throwing the occasional tantrum. But slowly, something began to shift. There was satisfaction in seeing a clean floor, in arranging the dishes properly, in preparing a meal without disaster. She began to understand, in a way she never had, that effort created results, not magic. Chijioke noticed. He came home one evening to find Kamkam cooking dinner, not perfectly but competently. The kitchen smelled of a simple, well-prepared meal, and Kamkam, her hair slightly disheveled and sleeves rolled up, looked up at him nervously. "Husband, dinner," she said, uncertain. Chijioke smiled, a mixture of pride and relief in his eyes. "Kamkam, this smells good. You're learning." Her cheeks flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and pride. I tried." It was a small moment but monumental for Kamkam. For the first time, she realized that her worth was not tied to being served but to what she could do for herself and others. Over the next few weeks, Kamkam's transformation became more evident. She woke up early, prepared meals without reminders, folded laundry neatly, and even cleaned the living room before guests arrived. Each task completed felt like a victory, a small conquest over the stubborn, spoiled part of herself she had clung to for years. Even her mother-in-law began to notice. "Kamkam," she said one afternoon, watching her fold clothes with care, "you're doing very well. I see you're learning discipline." Kamkam straightened, pride softening her features. "Thank you, Ma. I never realized. It feels good to do something for myself and for the house." Chijioke, too, was quietly impressed. He had married a woman who had seemed untouchable, untamable, and selfish. Yet now he saw a flicker of maturity, of understanding, of responsibility growing in her. Of course, it was not all smooth. Kamkam still faltered occasionally. She would drop a dish, overcook a meal, or snap at a staff member out of old habit. But each failure became less a catastrophe and more a lesson. She began to laugh at herself, sometimes rolling her eyes when she spilled water, and for the first time, she felt grace in imperfection. By the end of the month, Kamkam had transformed her attitude significantly. She no longer flaunted her queen status as an excuse for laziness. Instead, she understood that respect, love, and dignity were earned through effort and humility, not demands and tantrums. Her staff, once wary and frustrated, began to treat her with genuine respect. Chijioke's eyes held admiration and quiet affection, and Kamkam felt the strange, powerful satisfaction of knowing she had begun to earn her place in her home through effort, not entitlement. That evening, after a long day of cooking, cleaning, and organizing, Kamkam sank into the couch, exhausted but smiling. She whispered softly to herself, "So this is what it feels like to take responsibility, to be a real queen, not just someone who sits and demands." And for the first time in her life, Kamkam understood that power without effort is empty, and privilege without responsibility is meaningless. Months had passed since Kamkam's world had been upended. The girl who had once screamed, stomped, and demanded everything without lifting a finger had slowly, painfully, learned the value of effort. It started with small victories, cooking breakfast without burning it, folding laundry neatly, keeping the house tidy. But now, Kamkam was doing more than surviving. She was thriving. One morning, she awoke early not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. She moved through the house with a quiet determination, setting the table for breakfast, preparing a simple but wholesome meal. She smiled as Chijioke entered the kitchen, surprised to see her bustling about. "Good morning," she said, a spark of pride in her voice. I thought I'd start the day with breakfast. Chijioke's eyes softened. Kamkam, this is wonderful. You've changed so much. I'm proud of you. Kamkam blushed but did not hide behind her old arrogance. Instead, she felt a warmth she had never known. The satisfaction of knowing she had accomplished something with her own hands. Even her mother-in-law noticed. Kamkam, she said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You've truly grown. I see a young woman who understands responsibility, who respects her home and her family. You've become a queen in the truest sense. Not because of wealth or indulgence, but because of the care and effort you put into your life. Kamkam's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time, she understood that true respect and love were earned, not demanded. She had once thought that luxury and arrogance made her powerful, but now she saw that kindness, humility, and diligence were far stronger virtues. The household itself had transformed as well. The staff, once frustrated by her arrogance, now treated her with warmth and respect. Meals were prepared smoothly, rooms stayed tidy, and laughter filled the halls. Kamkam had not only learned to work for herself, but had also learned to care for those around her, creating harmony instead of chaos. Yet, the transformation was not only external. Kamkam's attitude had shifted within. I am Kamkam, the queen who learned to serve, to care, and to respect. And in that, I have found strength I never knew I had. Her journey had been long and painful, filled with tantrums, failures, and moments of humiliation. But it had also been rewarding, shaping her into a woman of character, discipline, and humility. Kamkam had finally learned that a true queen is not measured by how much she is served, but by how she lives, works, and gives to others. The house was quiet that morning, bathed in the soft glow of a new day. Kamkam moved gracefully through the rooms, carrying a tray of breakfast she had prepared herself. The aroma of freshly cooked eggs and bread filled the air, a small but meaningful symbol of her growth. She paused in the living room, looking around at the home she had once ruled with arrogance and tantrums. Memories flashed through her mind. The spoiled princess who screamed, threw fits, and demanded everything without lifting a finger. People admired her growth, her humility, and her courage to change. And though she had once resisted every lesson, she had finally understood the truth. Privilege is a gift, but responsibility is a crown. A true queen wears it not for glory, but for service. And so Kamkam, the girl who once refused to lift a finger, lived the rest of her life with dignity, grace, and strength. She became a woman respected not for wealth, beauty, or arrogance, but for her heart, her efforts, and her unwavering humility.